Okay, great. Thanks for being here. I know this is super extracurricular, so I appreciate your time. And I'm just going to try to make this casual and fun. So I've got some things that I want to share with you after many years of using these tools. And, I've spoken about these tools in front of groups probably hundreds of times at this point. And so I don't really have a serious formal agenda here. What I'd like to make sure I do is answer the questions you have. And so as I'm talking, feel free to interrupt me. If you have a question, it's more fun that way if we're having a conversation than if I'm just up here talking at you, okay? And so I'll prompt you along the way. Okay, I'm going to make it easier for everyone to get involved. If you're worried about talking, there's beer in the back. Okay, so that helps. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Birmingham. Let's see if I can get this going. And for the last couple of years, I've been doing consulting work. So I worked at Power Pivot Pro. I'm good friends with Rob Colley. The two of us and another guy took that organization and went from 2 consultants to, we grew it to about 20. Okay, so that's what I've been up to in 2015, 2016, and 2017, was consulting for them, but also helping them really accelerate that business. So if you've been to a Power Pivot Pro training, like those were trainings that I developed with Rob, and a lot of what I was doing during that time was training work. Okay, so that's, I don't really do as much of that anymore, but it's certainly something that I put in a lot of reps on. So what is training? It's like getting in front of a group and like answering any random question that someone has. And if you ever have a chance to do training on something that you know, it's highly recommended, right? You're going to get much, much, much better at that thing that you think you're already really good at because you have to field a lot of random questions about the tool. Okay, so that's primarily what I'm doing. That's me in the middle. That's Rob. Anybody know who the other guy is? Oh, okay. That's Gil. Gil worked on the Microsoft team. He helped build Power Query, and that was done in Israel. And he now lives in the States, and he is like a Power Query genius. If you don't know what that is, it's fine. We'll get to that in a little bit. I also run a modern Excel and Power BI user group, which is very specifically focused on the Microsoft analytics tools. So my interest is much bigger than just the Microsoft tools, but it's where I've spent a lot of time, okay? And it's just one slice of the overall sort of analytics landscape. So I'm not somebody who thinks that this tool solves all the problems. It solves a very specific set of problems really well. There are lots of other tools in the analytics toolbox, right, that we need to be familiar with. And it's really a question of picking the right tool for the job. And so I hope something I can communicate to you well today is, like, why do you use this tool? For what purposes? When do you not use it? What does it do well? What does it not do well? All of that. Okay. Who here has used Power BI before? Just quick show of hands. Okay. Who here just has they're just hearing about it for the first time? Okay, yeah, a couple people. Yeah, it's like, all right, well, thanks for being here. I'll try to handle kind of everyone's thing. If you see this guy, this is Robert Senseman. This is not me. He looks like me. Okay, this is my brother. He is a data scientist. He works at Oculus. So he does some interesting work too. Maybe if he's in town sometime, Nick, he could come talk, because he does Python every day for a living, right? So. All right, so a little bit about me. Grew up in Birmingham. I have a finance and accounting background. I'm not a technical person by training. Okay, I'm in the middle of the business kind of person by training. Who here describes themselves that way? They're like, came from the business side of things. Raise your hand. Versus people that maybe have a computer science degree. Who's in that crowd? A couple of people. Who didn't raise their hand, and what do you do? Yeah, they're just here for the beer. That's right. Yeah. So there are these two worlds, right? Like, people are either kind of sitting in the business and they're familiar with the business problems, and they typically have Excel, okay? And they're struggling trying to get Excel to do all the things they want it to do. And a lot of times those people drift into BI, right? Because the tools allow them to do a little more than they can just do in Excel. And then there are traditional IT people, right, who maybe know SQL Server really well or some sort of database product, and they sort of drift into BI projects sometimes too, and the business asks for help. Okay. There are all sorts of conflicts that happen when business people and IT people, sit down and try to have a good conversation. You may be familiar with some of them. We'll touch on some of those as we go along. So I definitely come from the business side. I've been working with these tools pretty much every day since 2011. So Power BI came out in 2015. Before that, really the core parts of the tool were already out in different kinds of products, and I'll kind of go through some of that. My real expertise is in DAX, which may not mean anything to you, but it's the language that powers Power BI. And it's sort of where you get the most value out of the product if you know that language. Okay, so before I got started on this Power BI conversation, I thought we might have a quick talk about, well, what is analytics? Just to sort of clarify what we mean here so that when we talk about this tool, we understand what problem it solves. So now it's your turn. So what I'd like to hear from a couple of people is what do you think, how would you answer this question, what is analytics? Trends in data. Okay, good, yes?
Taking a set of data and making it understandable to the common person.
Yes, these are all really good. Okay, anything else?
I've always viewed it as there's three things you do with data.
Yep.
You extract it, you analyze it, and you present it.
Okay.
So I would say analyzing is not extracting and presenting.
That's all the other stuff. Yeah, okay, great. Okay, cool. So I think everyone got a good piece of it there. So things exist in the world, events happen in the world, and people observe them. Okay, this is sort of, we have our 5 senses right in the world. We're trying to make decisions about things and act accordingly. And so there are all these things that happen in between that we call analytics broadly, but there are actually a number of different things. So things or events get digitized, right? So someone puts some data into a system or a sensor reads something. Okay, this is data. All right, it's just a digitized form of something or event in the world. This data gets structured or stored in some way. All right, so it goes in a database or someone writes it down on a piece of paper, whatever, okay. The data gets modeled, and we'll talk about what we mean by this in a little bit, but this is where the data starts to be put into a format where it's useful for analyzing. Okay, and then data gets analyzed. And so I love what everyone said about analysis, right? It's making data useful for people to make a decision, so understanding the trends in it, right? Things like that. It's about context, okay? So we take data and we put context around it so that people understand it and can use it, okay? So context is an important word when we talk about analysis. And then to Nick's point, then things get shared and interpreted. So somewhere in here, right, is what you're talking about, Nick, where things get extracted and transformed. This is kind of the analysis piece. Here's where things get shared with people. These are really actually very distinct things, okay? And when we talk about analysis, sometimes we mean like big A analysis, which could be like all of it. And there's like little a analysis, which is really just this piece here. And so I'm going to come back to this in a minute and talk about where Power BI fits in this. Like, what does it do on all these pieces? And this may be useful next month, right, when you talk about Tableau or when we talk about other tools, right? It's kind of, and we could have different versions of this, but it's kind of like, where does that tool fit into all of this? All right. So from a role standpoint, is anyone here a data engineer, a database person, a DBA, that kind of role? Okay, good. This will be much easier. We can just make fun of them. They're not here. All right. So these are the people that are really undervalued and can also be really annoying, but they are in charge of our data, right? They structure it. They put it somewhere. They often make it hard for us to get to it. Okay, but there's a valid thing going on here. And us as analysts or data scientists really are dealing with all of these other pieces. Okay, so there's no one in here who's creating databases, making sure the data's in the database, all that kind of stuff, right? Not all the time. Sometimes. Okay, that's good. And most business-oriented people who grew up in finance and accounting or some other part of the business are not are not these data type people. We're on the other side. All right. Any questions about this? Did I miss something obvious? I'm not sure I got it quite right. Okay. All right, so Microsoft Analytics. So this is a really brief tutorial. It's leaving some things out. I just want you to understand the general trend here. So databases have been around for a long time. Microsoft introduced their first analytics product in 2001. Okay, and it was called SQL Server Analysis Services Multidimensional. And this product is still around. It's still, you probably have it at a lot of your companies. Okay, it's installed in a lot of places and it's not going away. Over a decade later, Microsoft basically rebuilt this product. Right? What would we have done differently if we could have fixed all the mistakes we made in this product? Okay? And this one was called SQL Server Analysis Services Tabular. And when they built this in 2012, they realized desktops were really fast at the time, and so they took this same technology that was living on their servers and they put it in Excel. So in 2012, if you opened up Excel, you could install this Power Pivot add-in. Okay? This was actually really cool because for the first time we had this really powerful analytics technology, and it was just on people's desktops. So that would be all the business people in the room. That would be everyone in here, right, who works in Excel. You've had access to this technology that I'm going to show you for the last 7 or 8 years. Okay? So if you're just seeing it for the first time, you should feel some sense of loss and wasted, wasted time. When I talk about Power BI, okay, and as we go along, you'll see this. Tabular, this SQL Server product, Power Pivot, Power BI, all these tools are actually the same tool behind the scenes. Okay? They have the same engines in them. Microsoft has chosen to present them in 3 different ways. If you're an Excel person, you can use it here. If you're a SQL Server person, you can use it here. If you're a BI person, you can use it here. But if you know how to use one of them, you know how to use all 3 of them. Okay? So later, okay, they introduced a tool called Power Query. We're still just in Excel here. Power BI doesn't exist. And then in 2015, they introduced Power BI. Okay? And some people wonder about, why they introduced a new tool that did the same things all the other tools did. Well, they were trying to compete with people like Tableau and other BI vendors who were releasing new features very frequently. When they had Power Pivot and Power Query stuck in Excel, we only get a new version of Excel every 3 years. So that was too slow of a cadence to try to, keep up. And also, if you've dealt with this in your organization, right, some people have Excel 2016, some people have 2013, some people have 2010, some people have 2000, right, it goes. And so it was hard because people had different versions on this stuff. So they created this product, Power BI, that could compete with other BI vendors, and there wasn't all this version issues and all this kind of nonsense, okay? And also a big problem in Excel, for all the people that work in Excel, is it's hard to share things. Certainly you've experienced this, passing Excel files around. Who's got the most recent version? There's no security, on and on, all this kind of stuff, okay? So Power BI solves a lot of the sharing problems too, which we'll see. It's kind of like a YouTube model, right, where we can publish things and people can consume them, and it's easy, all right? So that's 2015. Power BI has changed a lot since 2015. I mean, new features, right? But at the core of it, it's been the same for probably 3 years now. So these are Microsoft's workhorses in analytics for the foreseeable future. It's Power Pivot, it's SQL Server Analysis Service Tabular, it's Power BI. Okay. So what is Power BI? So for the purposes of this talk, when I say Power BI, I'm going to use that to refer to all the Microsoft Analytics stuff. So Power Pivot, Tabular, it's just easier. Right? I don't have to say all those big words over and over again. So Power BI is just all of them. Okay? And it's not just a visualization tool. So when you try to sell BI tools, you show all the visualizations. It's like the sizzly, sexy stuff. It's the stuff your dumb manager buys, right? Because it's like cool looking and it's going to make them look good. It's a sales effort, okay, when I talk about visualization. If your dumb manager's in the room, I'm sorry. If you laughed especially, I'm really sorry for you. But a visualization is a piece of it, okay? And I want to show you in the next slide that it's just a small piece, really. It's not a replacement tool for good plumbing. So what is good plumbing? Like having good databases, having a data warehouse, things like this. It doesn't replace those things, okay? But at the same time, if your organization doesn't have all that fancy stuff, these are my little caveat stars right here. If your organization doesn't have a data warehouse or have fancy, I call that stuff plumbing, you can get a lot done in Power BI, like bringing data from multiple different data sources together into one place and making sense of it. So you don't have to have a data warehouse to get started. In fact, a lot of the projects I do for people, they show up and they say, someone told us we need a data warehouse. Right? I say, well, why? And they say, well, we have 3 different systems, and we need to create some reports that use the data from 3 different systems. And so we need to create a whole new database and bring all that stuff in so we can report on it. And what I tell people is that's probably not the best place to start. So in Power BI, for example, we can go into your CRM system, go into your accounting system, go into some other system, bring all this stuff together, and start making reporting pretty quickly, right, in a matter of weeks. Whereas data warehouse projects it's not uncommon for them to be a year or 2-year kind of endeavors. And they're really expensive. So it's not a replacement for good plumbing, but it's a really good prototyping tool when people are trying to build a data warehouse, and this helps them, get something done quickly. So, your business can't wait around for 12 or 18 months to get a report. Okay. Yeah. Oh gosh, I think it's like a requirement that everybody gets dragged into it, I don't know exactly how to answer the question, right? Typically in projects like that, they're like just a bunch of different roles that come into play. You have someone who designs the database. You have someone who meets with all the users and gathers their requirements. You have someone who specializes in reporting. You have someone who specializes in ETL, on and on and on and on and on. I think the better question is how many people are involved in a Power BI project, and it can really be like one person, right? Because the tools are meant for you to sit down and you to get all the data, you to design the model, you to design the reports. Okay, you don't need a functional specialist for every single piece of that. Does that answer a little bit? Yeah. Okay. Power BI is not a data science or predictive analytics tool. Okay. Now, there's a couple stars here because it does have these tools built into it. So R, Python, these languages people use to do data science are part of Power BI. But its purpose is not to create predictive models and things like that. Okay. So what is Power BI? I call Power BI a question answering machine. So businesses have ongoing, recurring needs to answer certain questions about their business. Okay. And what a Power BI model is a question answering machine. So someone should be able to go and ask a question about the business and get an answer quickly. Now, if you've ever done Excel style reporting, you bring your Excel stuff to the meeting because someone asked for it, they look at your report, and someone give me a sense of what happens at that point. Yes, fantastic, right? So we think the purpose of a report is to answer people's questions, but it's not. Okay, the purpose of a report is to help people ask better questions about the business. Okay, and so what happens then? You're in this meeting, you have this Excel report, they ask you these questions. What do you have to do then?
Go back and create a report.
Exactly. So the cadence here is, well, I'll go back to my desk and I will create something for you. Okay, and so it's not just a question answering machine. The idea is to have a data model where you can create a report for somebody and they can interact with it, and so they can ask the next question in real time. Right? You're looking at sales for a region. They want to drill in and see all the offices. You click the drill down button. You're looking at the offices. You proceed. Right? So you can ask 10 questions in a meeting as opposed to just 1 or 2. And so what happens in Power BI is that length to get to sort of the real answer they want, which may be 5, 10 questions into it, happens in the meeting as opposed to over a couple of weeks. So this is a big difference, okay? The analytics tool is better matched up with the way humans actually make decisions, which is a big deal, okay? And as the next slide will show, Power BI is also, it does three things really well. It does ETL, which is a fancy word for getting data out of some other system and bringing it in. Okay, it means extract, transform, and load. It does modeling really well, which means taking all the different parts of your business and creating a model of them that represents, all the things and events that happen in your business. And it does analytics really well, so providing context around the data so that it's useful for people to make a decision. Okay, and it's all rolled up into one tool. All modern BI tools do these three things to a certain extent. So you'll see Tableau next month. There's an ETL piece in there. There's a modeling piece in there. There's an analytics piece in there. Okay. It's also a visualization tool. Okay, but in my mind, that's probably the least important part. I'm not saying it's not an important part. It's a very important part. My opinion as a BI expert, it's probably the least important part. It's sort of a commoditized thing across the tools. There are a lot of good visualization tools. Tableau is probably the best visualization tool, but they all have, more or less a pretty good piece of that. Questions about this? Everyone still awake? All right, here's this slide again. So when we talk about Power BI, there's a bunch of pieces in it. Power BI is not just one thing. There's a lot of stuff in there. So in the modeling layer, there's this tool called Power Query, which is used to go grab data out of systems. Okay? The data we want out of a system, whether it's in a database or a spreadsheet or a PDF or whatever, it's not in the format we want, right? It rarely is. It's wide and we want it to be tall, right? It has this many rows and we want to filter this stuff out. We don't want all these columns. We want to rename stuff, on and on and on and on and on, okay? So Power Query is meant to get data and get it in the right shape. As many times as I've given these talks, I think it's the first time people have been drinking beer, which is great. Okay. And so once we have all of our data in here, we model it together. So this tabular engine is part of Power BI. Okay, it's the modeling tool. Yeah.
So with Power Query, does it actually decouple the data from the database source?
So, yeah, so there are two modes here. Okay, there's a mode where we actually import it all. And we're not in Excel here, so let's just assume for a minute that we're actually in the Power BI tool, which we'll see in a second. But same thing in Excel. It's going to grab it and it's going to create a new copy of it. We're essentially creating a new database, right, which is like an analytical, like OLAP style database. Okay?
So if you've got 10 million records of data, this wouldn't be a good method.
Oh, that's a great question. So the thing that Microsoft has solved here in this layer is that their data modeling engine has an awesome compression engine in it. So it's not uncommon that I work with a business, like a reasonably big business, and the data model for their whole business is like 100 megabytes, right? Even if they have 50 million rows or whatever, right? Microsoft got some like Eastern European guys who probably would be good like chess champions, and they got them to build some compression tools in here. So, but for stuff that's really big, right? If you put it on SAP HANA and there's like a whole lot of data, there's also a direct query thing where it passes the query directly to the database and pulls it back. And so that's like a live. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so you still model the metadata rather than the actual data.
Right. Yep. All right, so that's modeling. Okay, and we'll see this. I think this will make more sense for a lot of people when you actually see it. Then there's analysis. Okay, so this is like writing calculations. So, we have some data for a retail company. There's sales data in there, but someone says, oh, I'd like to see the month-over-month percentage change in sales. It's like, well, that's not in the data, right? That's an analytical thing we have to create, okay? So the language for this is DAX. It's built to look like Excel formulas, which makes it pretty easy to get into it first. There's a little bit of a learning curve to it because it's not Excel, okay? But all the functions you have in Excel are in DAX. And we'll look at some of those. And then finally, this whole sharing thing. So there's a visualization layer in here, and then there's the Power BI service, which is where you publish things. So you've made some nice thing. You want people to consume it. You can publish in a place where people have to log in, and there's security, and it refreshes itself, and all this kind of stuff. So these are the three pieces. Now, some people are experts at just little segments of this. Like there are people that just do visualization for a living. There are people that just do Power Query for a living, on and on and on. With this tool, right, you want to kind of be good at all of them. I'm not saying an expert at all of them, but it's perfectly reasonable that you kind of have some sense of how it all works. Okay, so notice that Power Query is not really living up, I'm sorry, Power BI is not really living up here, right? It's not a database tool in the traditional sense, but it does take people to the finish line as far as putting stuff in front of people to make decisions. Okay, so I think this is really, it can be a little confusing at first. Microsoft likes to create nouns, okay? So you take a product and you create 1,000 nouns in it, so it's like Power Query, tabular, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, all of this is Power BI, okay, and I want to kind of walk you through how you build one of these things so you understand how it all hangs together, okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of just do a demo, okay? And I'm going to start with a database, and we're going to connect to it, and we're going to pull some data out of it into Power BI. We're going to do that with Power Query. All right, we're going to clean it up a little bit, okay? The database that we're pulling it from is pretty clean, so there's not a lot of issues there. And then we're going to create a data model out of it. So I'm going to show you what that means, how you think about it, the questions you ask. And then we'll immediately create some visualizations, and then we'll create some DAX calculations to kind of give you a sense of how the analytical piece works. Okay? Anybody written DAX before? A little bit? You guys have a lot of this going on in your company. I know you do. Yeah, you're going to be writing a lot of this. Yeah. Okay. DAX for dummies. All right. Yeah. Just as a side note, right, if you're interested in doing more of this, get in touch with me, because I love giving people some sense of how to proceed, when you're trying to learn. Because there is a lot of stuff out there, and there's kind of a right order to do it in, learn this first, and then this, and then this. And so if you are going to go learn some stuff, I'd be happy to kind of point you in the right direction. Okay, this is Power BI Desktop. It's a Windows application. Okay, so if you have a Mac, sorry. I know. This is where you can go get another drink. So, you can get a virtual machine on Azure, or you can do Parallels or something. I will say, if you are doing Parallels or something, this is a fairly memory-intensive application, so having 16 gigs of RAM on your computer or more is very helpful. Part of the reason that this is so fast is it stores all the data in your memory as opposed to on your hard drive, so it can go and retrieve it really quickly. It's blazing fast. So here's the canvas, and the way every single one of these projects starts is right up here, right where we're going to go and get some data. Okay? Let me get my Zoom it going here. Let's see if I have that. Let me go download it really quick. Oops, that's what I want. Nope. Much better, right? Okay. So external data. So all data is external to Power BI. Power BI has no data in it, so we got to go get it from somewhere. And so this really could be called Power Query. That's what's going on up here. So, oops, not that one. Nope. How about this one? So when you click on Get Data, it has the most common things sitting right up here where people might go get stuff. But if we click More, we get the full menu. And there's a lot of stuff on here. I think Microsoft's trying to make the point that they want to be pretty agnostic as to where your data lives. Okay? So a lot of people's data just lives in Excel, or lives in PDFs, or it lives in some text kind of file. Okay? That used to be a real pain in the ass. It's much less of a problem now. If you have a bunch of data that's just in Excel, even if it's poorly formatted in a way that's not helpful for you, you can use it without having to go convince that person to, instead of doing it this way, do it this way. You don't have to do that anymore. Just leave it like it is. I'll go grab it and I'll clean it up. And we'll look at some of that. If your stuff's not in Excel or some kind of text file, it's usually in some kind of database. There are all sorts of databases in here. It might be nice just to come here and take a look and see. Like Chris, like I'm in here doing Salesforce stuff a lot. Salesforce works really well with this. But as far as the different applications, it's a bit of a little mishmash of stuff. So
What about the PDF?
I know, what about it?
Yeah.
That's a new feature this month. See where it says beta right there. So I would just say give it a try. You know, there are tools where you can extract stuff out of a PDF. I don't know if you've ever used any of them.
Yeah, and it doesn't work well.
Some of them are better than others, okay? But we're dealing with something that's inherently messy and unstructured. What's that?
What is a good one to use to get stuff from a PDF?
I can't think of it off the top of my mind, but if I went, yeah, someone have an opinion?
That one's the one I use, because it's the only one that really allows me to use tables and then actually create my own template from lines. Whereas everything else kind of wants to do its own table, and it makes no sense.
So this one will find a table for you, which is nice. I just messed around. I mean, this literally came out middle of last week, so I haven't really spent a lot of time with it. Okay. But yeah, that data is just inherently messy, so sometimes it's just not, you know, how do you clean it up? It just is a mess. And so this is like do the best we can kind of stuff. So we're going to go into a SQL Server database today. And who here spent any time in databases? Okay, that's good. Meaning like you convinced your IT people to let you in there, and after 6 months they said yes. And now you're in there and you're just trying to like pull every table out and figure out what the hell's going on. Is that the level of expertise we're talking about here? I'm not that much further along than you are, okay, in this. I mean, I have some SQL Server certifications and things, but I'm mostly in there just pulling data out. It's like, give me a rectangle. Give me a rectangle of data. I'm going to do some stuff with it, right? Okay, so this company is the sort of traditional Microsoft demo company. It's called AdventureWorks, and it's a retail company. And so they sell bicycles. And so there's some tables in here, and this is like the cleaned up data warehouse version of it. So there's some tables in here. Who knows what these dim and fact things mean? Who wants to tell me what that is? Anybody know? Great, doesn't matter. All right, so there's this company in here called Internet Sales, which has all the sales for the company in it. So we're going to go grab that. We're interested in looking at other transactions. And then we're going to grab some other tables in here related to other pieces of the company. So, you know, products. You know, we sold something. Which product was it? Which customer was it? When did it happen? Where did it happen? So here's some regional data, okay? So we want to go into this database and grab this stuff. And we're going to do a little bit of cleanup as we do it. But this is the stuff that's going to end up coming into our model. And so I'm going to go and get the data. I'm going to go to SQL Server. I think we can just do this. Let's see what happens. So you see here, Chris, where it says import or direct query. Okay, that answers that question. Yeah, so you can write a SQL query here, but don't ever do that. Okay? That's as advanced as it gets. So it's going to go and connect to this thing.
So whenever you do the import, does it load data up into RAM?
It does.
So you can sit there and watch your RAM utilization start ticking up depending on your compression?
Totally. Yeah. So
That's the problem we have with Tableau and especially Lumira on the SAP stack.
totally. I think Microsoft's done a slightly better job, just because this part of the tool is a little older for them. They've done a slightly better job of making the query part not just kill your machine. And they've taken some shortcuts in there, like only loading parts of the data as you go through, so it's not having to look at everything. So So what database do we want? Okay, so I'm just going to go, this is, if you've worked with a database, you have to go and figure out which tables are which and all this kind of stuff. So I know here that we want the customers, we want the dates, I want the geography. Now, there are 3 different product-related tables in here. So there's a list of all the products, and then in the database, there's a list of which category that product belongs to and which subcategory it belongs to. So those are all different tables, all right? Very common in a database. Everything's broken up into different tables. We want to take all that stuff and put it together, okay? Because we want our product table to also have the subcategory, also have the category, right? That's like a holistic view of the product. So for now, I'm just going to grab the product table, and I'll show you how it makes this easy for us to do that. And then, actually, I think sales territory is what I want. Okay, so I just went and picked all these pieces out of the database, and I'm going to tell it then, I can load this straight in, but the idea here is to always hit edit, because we may want to do some things to these tables before we load them in. When you hit edit, it's going to bring up a new window. So this window is the Power Query window. Like if you went into Excel and you did the same thing, you'd get this same exact looking window. The colors are a little different in Excel, right? It's greens instead of yellows, okay? But this window is the same in Power BI, in Excel, and in SQL Server. Okay, so if you know one tool, you know all 3. And what you see here on the left is this is each one of the tables that we brought in. And so what we would do here is we would rename them, like give them good human-sounding names. And what we're going to do here is really 4 or 5 things. So when we bring in data, what do we need to do to it? We want to filter the data, okay? Not all the time, but sometimes, right? It's giving me this, I only want this, okay? We're going to take out the columns we don't want. It's giving me all this, I only want this, okay? We're going to rename things, because databases have horrible names generally. Thank you, DBAs and IT people who aren't here, right? And so by the time it comes into our model, the stuff we want is going to be there. The stuff we want is not. And it's named stuff that we and everyone else in the company can understand. Pretty simple, right? So lots of buttons on here, okay? This is not a programming language type application. This is a clickety-clickety type thing, okay? And so just for an example, if I came to the customer table, and let's say I wanted to just keep the customer key, and I'm just going to hold down Control, and we'll pick their first name. Let's see what else we might want here. Just pick a couple of things. Customer key. What if their full name is in here? That's really what I want. Well, we'll just do first and last. Okay. So I just picked 3 columns. I'm just going to right-click them and tell it to remove all the other stuff. Okay. So one thing I like to do when I'm loading data for the first time is like aggressively remove all the stuff. So there are 2 ways to think about this. I don't know what I want, so I'm just going to bring it all in, and I'll figure it out later. Okay? So you can just store this in the back of your head as a tip. When you do that, you bring in everything, and then you never bother to delete everything. All right? So it stays big. The other way to think about it is I'm only going to bring the things I need, and so I'm going to start really small, and then when I need to add something else, I'm just going to go back in and put it back in. So the model grows as you put in things you need. Does that make sense? Okay. If you start this way with small and you grow it over time, your model stays nice and clean. If you bring in everything at the beginning, it never gets any smaller.
You have the ability here of creating a new column with combination of first and last name.
Okay, so everyone's familiar with good questions and bad questions? Good questions and great questions? Okay, so a good question is one I know the answer to. A great one is one that I was like just about to answer. Right, so in this layer 2, we can enrich the data. So if we want to add another column in here, you see at the top the way they've done this. Oops. There are 2 ribbon buttons up here. There's transform, so that means take one of a column and change it in some way. And then there's add column, which means we're going to create a new one. Right, so if I picked first name, picked last name, clicked on add column, here is a button to merge them. Okay, you can think of this layer, if you're familiar with SQL, this is SQL for people who don't know SQL. Okay, if that makes sense. Like sometimes you have to go to your database person and say, hey, could you add this column in or do this kind of stuff? And they're like, yeah, sure, give me like 3 or 4 weeks, you know. And here you would just go do it yourself, okay, which is considerably faster. So we'll put a space in between them, and we'll call this full name. Okay, so all of this kind of stuff happens here in Power Query. Right, so I would have grabbed the last name first and then held down and grabbed the first name second, okay, and then merge them. And if you need to do some sort of custom thing, you can. So if we wanted to do a comma and a space, okay, and something like this, right? Okay, so you have a lot of flexibility here. That's just one button on here. There are lots of different buttons on here, okay?
If you were crazy in the head like I am, could you manipulate that code that's out there?
Okay, absolutely, yeah. So there is a language behind this called M, which is weird. It's hard to search for in Google. But every one of these buttons you click on does produce some code behind it. And there are people like Gil in the first slide who was standing with us in that picture. Like that's what he does for a living, is writes that stuff. I've basically made money for the last 7 or 8 years, like just doing this kind of stuff. I almost never get in there and do that, right? It just doesn't come up in the course of like even fairly complex stuff. Okay, so Power Query in a nutshell. Like when we were Power Pivot Pro, we taught a whole day on this. Okay, you could spend 2 or 3 days learning how to use this tool. The good news is for like Excel people, it's clicking buttons. Okay, you just have to know which buttons to click on. You have to have a sense of what it can do. Okay, and that's a good place to start. So one thing I want to mention before we jump on to the next part is over here on the right, you have sort of a running list of all the things we've done. So we went to the database, we told it which tables we wanted, we removed some columns, we inserted some columns, on and on. So it keeps track of all the things you've done. And so let's say we were like, oh shoot, I wish I hadn't, you know, removed that other column that I might have needed. We can go back to that step, we can edit it, right, and we could change, you know, we could add another piece in here. Just by clicking on the gear icon. So this was my point of, if you feel like you've made a mistake in this, you haven't, right, you just come back to it later and alter it. How common is it where you pull in data a certain way, you get your whole analysis done, you show it to someone and they're like, oh, you should have left these rows out, or you should have done right. And the idea here is you've built all of that stuff, and then you come back to this first part and you change the query a little bit and it just all flows through. Right? You don't have to redo anything, right? You're just tweaking it. Okay. Power Query is an enormous time saver. I'd say, I don't know, you tell me, people who work with Excel, I mean, how much time is spent just like getting the data in the right shape? And that's why when someone says, hey, well, what about this question I have? You're like, oh, shit, because then you have to go back and you have to reshape all of it, right? You've got to reshape all the data just to get that one little chart that you need. And the idea is to like set all that stuff on autopilot. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and just click load here. It's up here. It's just close and apply. It's going to take this stuff. It's going to go into the database. It's going to grab it all, and it's going to bring it in here. So another part of this, too, for Excel people is what we're setting up here when we create these reports is a direct connection to the data that can be refreshed. So next month, when it's time to do our report again, we just hit the refresh button. We're done. Okay? Who's living this way now? Where you just hit the refresh button? Yeah, like, no. Like, there, you know, that's, so when I said this has been available since 2011, I want you to think of all the work you've done over the past 7 or 8 years, refreshing that weekly or monthly report and what that's like, and then just maybe think about maybe making a change. And just as a reminder, too, this is Power BI. All this stuff is sitting right in your copy of Excel on your desktop right now. Okay, so You don't need to go get a new tool to do this. You can start using this tomorrow, okay? In a way where the people you're giving this stuff to won't even know you're doing things differently. Okay. Okay, so 3 icons over here. This is the visualization pane where we're going to end up building some stuff. This shows us each one of our tables that we brought in, kind of in an Excel-style grid. Okay. This one is the data model. Okay, so this is where we're going to go next. And if you've ever worked in a database or worked with Access or something like that, you have seen a database diagram. So that's all this is. There are two types of tables in a database. It goes back to this dim and fact thing. So when we build a data model, we have data tables and we have lookup tables. You're not going to see these names on the internet. This is what I call them. Okay? A data table is taller than it is wide. So this is a transactional thing. There's usually a date. You know, we sold something. That's a very common one. Some transactional thing happened, some event. And we're keeping track of them. So these tables get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? The lookup tables are things, like list of things. So customers, locations, people, things like this. The tables grow, but not nearly as fast, okay? And they're usually very wide because we keep a lot of information about a customer, all right? And so in all your models, you're going to have lookup tables, okay, and they're called dimensions, okay? BI people call them dimensions. That's why they say dim this, dim that, okay? It's not a good name, right? It's a technical name. The lookup tables in your model provide context to your data. When did something happen? Who did it? What was it? Who, what, when, how, all that kind of stuff, okay? So lookup tables are the context. So when we talk about doing analysis, the lookup tables are important because this is the next question the person asked, right? You're showing them all the sales, and they said, well, what about by day? I said, oh, okay. And so you have this day in your model, right? And then you can drag it into your report, and all of a sudden you can see the days. So this is a little question answering machine that we've already built here, okay? So you can answer any question now about your company that's around sales that's related to any one of these entities. Who here writes VLOOKUP a lot? Yeah. Okay. So we create, a pivot table can only have one table under it. So we get our data, and then we know we need to have some information about a customer, so we go VLOOKUP it from the customer table. It's on there, okay? And then we go to the meeting, and they say, oh, what about geography? And you go back, and you write another VLOOKUP, right? And you just keep writing VLOOKUPs to add stuff onto your table, okay? You can think of a data model as the VLOOKUP killer. Because that first part of the VLOOKUP, remember, you're saying match this column with this one. Right? That's what you're doing. Well, in your model, that's already done. Right? It knows that the date over here is the date over here, and the customer over here is the customer over here. Right? All that matching has already been done for you. So you don't have to write VLOOKUP anymore. Or if you're like a fancy index match person. I feel like Nick probably is. Yeah. All right, Chris and Nick just fist bumped. I want that to be on the recording. Okay. All right, so this is what a data model looks like. You can think of it as the VLOOKUP killer. And so what it allows you to do, just very simply, is if we come back here and we grab, well, let's grab something like a sales territory. And this stuff is still pretty poorly named. So here's country. Okay, and then we go to our sales table. And we grab sales amount. It's already trying to put it on a map because it knows it's some kind of geography. But let's make this like a human readable size really quick. Okay. So without really doing anything, we can look at our countries and our sales amount. And so you're in the meeting and someone says, oh, well, what does that look like by gender, for each country? And here's where you go to your customer table and grab the gender thing and just like drag it on here. Yep. Did I lose it?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Did it go to sleep? Every person is awake, but the computer is bored. Yeah. All right. In the downtime, I'm going to share a pro tip. So, who here in the room is someone who manages people who do this for a living? Most people here have their hands on the keyboard, right? You're like the people doing the work. Okay. So, you can like give people real time, like bang, like there you go, I just put the gender on the report, let's keep going. Their expectations for how long that takes are like a little longer now, right? Because normally it's like, well, we got to leave the meeting and I'll go do some stuff, and tomorrow, how about tomorrow? Is that good? So my suggestion when someone asks you to add something to a report like that I just did that's like a click is make them wait 30 minutes. Okay, so you can role model this. Someone says, oh, what about gender? You say, I can totally do that. It's going to be 30 minutes. Now, 30 minutes to them is like 10 or 15 times faster. You know it only takes 30 seconds. So you can go back to your desk, do it, and then it's up to you what you do with like the next 29 minutes. All right? Like, the reality is, as soon as they think that it's just a drag, which it is, but they're going to start to value you less. Oh, because it's just easy. So easy. What do I need? Why am I paying you so much? Right? And you're getting paid because you created the structure that allows it to be easy. Right? I mean, you've done an amazing thing here, but all they see is, gosh, it's so easy now. So be a little mindful of this, right? 30-minute minimum. My suggestion, okay? I would bill someone at least a half a day for that. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, if you've worked with an IT department who controls BI, you're familiar with this thing where it's like, hey, could we put the gender column on this report? And you have someone tell you, yeah, it's going to be 3 weeks. Like, this is not uncommon, right? Like, 3 weeks, right? And so, like, that's really very common. And so, oh, I think it knows it's nighttime. That's why I got it red here.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
I think we broke the projector.
No, I think it works fine. That works fine. Okay. So this is without really writing any calculations. We did this. So let's say for the same kind of report, though, we wanted to add an element of time into it. And a lot of the stuff we do in Excel that's a little bit of a pain in the ass is around time, especially when we talk about ratios and sort of month over month and things like this. DAX is really good at what we call time intelligence. Okay, so it's any kind of time-related context. You'd be amazed how many times I'm in companies, we're looking at reports, like sales went up in March. And I'm like, yep, there are more days in March, right? Like little things like this that people don't think about, right? Or our sales are up 10% in November. It's like, well, yeah, it's the holidays. They're normally up 20%, and so 10% sucks. Actually down 10% or whatever, right? And so all these elements of time are really important, and most people's reports, when you're doing reporting in Excel, you don't have them. You don't deal with any of that stuff because it's too much of a pain. You just don't do it, right? And so the idea here is to write some formulas that do that stuff pretty much effortlessly. You write them once, you just reuse them over and over again. It handles all of that, okay? So I want to show you a version of that really quick, okay? And what I want to do here is 2 things. I want to do average daily sales, okay? So we take the difference in the days and the months out of it, right? So if March has more months than February, whatever, we normalize it to the day. And then I want to show you how to do a month-over-month comparison. Okay, just to give you a sense of how it works. The nice thing about DAX is you write these formulas and you put them in your report, and then when someone says, hey, could you break it out by gender or whatever, you can still drag stuff on and off the report and it just adjusts. Okay? This is really why DAX is cool. If you ever do ratio analysis in Excel, you actually spend the time to do it, and someone asks for it at a different level, right? That's when like it just grinds to a halt. That's when you have to go back and redo the whole thing. All right, so let's look at this. So when we talk about DAX, there are a couple different things we can do with DAX, but for now I'm going to teach you how to write a measure, okay? So a measure is sort of this like free-floating calculation that we can use and pull into a report, and it does some calculation for us, all right? So the first measure I'm going to write is I'm just going to rewrite the sales measure. Is it going to let me do this? It's really thinking about it today. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right, so this formula bar up here, it's kind of meant to look like Excel, so we could call this sales, okay? And I'm just going to, nope, that is not what I want. Okay, so this is a very simple formula in DAX. So in our internet sales table, there's a sales amount column. I'm going to go in and I'm going to sum it up. The biggest difference between DAX and Excel is in DAX, there's no cell reference. There's no A1, B2, whatever, okay? So this makes people feel a little sad at first, but it's much simpler actually, and it makes our formulas much more readable, right? Who looks at a formula and they're like, what is B3? I have no idea, right? It's hard to like audit even your own work, okay? So here's sales, and I'm going to write these formulas. They're not going to make 100% sense to you right now. I'm going to go through it quickly, okay? So if we want to then add average daily sales to it, this is a little note for the future. I think it's slow because the camera is also running on it. So average daily sales is the sales measure that we just wrote. Okay, we're just going to reuse it. And I want to count the number of days in a month. And so if we think about it, we have a date table in there, and I haven't shown it to you yet, but every row is a day. So January 1st, January 2nd, right? It just goes like that. And so if I'm looking at a particular month, and you imagine filtering that date table down just to the days in the month, if I counted the number of rows in it, well, that's how many days there are in the month, because each row is a day. Okay? And so if we take the sales and we divide it just by the number of rows that are present in our date table, okay, that's going to give us our average daily sales. So let me give you a sense of how this might work. So we'll redo our report a little bit. We will put our sales on here. We will put our average daily sales. Let's see what's in our date table. I just want a year. How about fiscal year? Once again, it's teeny tiny. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what it's done is, for this year, it's figured out how many days there are, and it's calculated the average daily sales given how many days. All right? So if I went in and put the month in here, all right, someone says, well, can I see it at the month level? It's like, sure, right? There it is. All right, so what's going on with our months? Any idea? Alphabetized, right? I mean, come on. So anytime you have text in here, it doesn't know how to deal with it except alphabetically, right? It doesn't just like, I think with dates it should be able to figure it out, right? That would be nice. But if you have text in here, it's going to sort it alphabetically. You can deal with this by going in to the table itself and asking it to sort it differently. So if we can find the month in here, here it is, and I can ask it to sort it. So every time you see July, for example, if you could actually sort it by the month number of the year. So January is 1, February is 2, on and on and on. And when we do that, right, it should fix itself. There we go. Okay. All right, so we started with the year, we drilled into the month. Everything's still working great. Okay, if we wanted to come in here and put the gender in here like we did earlier, we don't have to rewrite the average daily sales formula. Okay? It just works. All right, so I hope this one little example will give you some sense of how you write the formula once and you just use it over and over again. Okay, that's the power of it. Remember, question answering machine, someone has a question about average daily sales, they can ask that question about any entity that's in the model, customers, regions, employees, whatever, okay? That's what DAX does. If we were going to do month over month, for example, just to give you a sense of what that might look like. So let's say we were going to do month over month, average daily sales. So here we want to divide, let's see, actually we can create a couple of variables in here. So we can say this month, and here this month is just the sales amount. Right, so if I'm in February, for example, and I put the sales amount on there, that's the sales for that month. Okay? If I want it to go get last month, let me do this so we can see it. If I want it to do last month, then that requires a different kind of formula. So we could say calculate the sales a little bit of a lag here. So I want you to calculate the sales, but I'd like you to go back a month. Okay, this kind of looks like Excel, but all of a sudden it's like, no, that's, we can't do that in Excel. So then if I want month over month, right, it's this month minus last month divided by last month, okay? So quickly, this starts to feel like a programming language. And so what I want you to understand is if you're writing formulas in Excel, you're already a programmer, okay? You have a pretty crummy programming language, okay? Like Excel, the way it works is like not, right? But you are doing programming. I would say Excel is the world's most popular programming language. Just sheer brute numbers of people using it, okay? When you start doing DAX and you know Excel, you get into it, right? You realize pretty quickly, right, that the Excel knowledge that you've been gaining actually, does start to feel like a programming language. I'm not really sure what I did wrong, so we'll just... Well, all right. I've broken it already. Oops. Yep, that makes sense. So it wants an actual date in here. This is date alternate. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so if we drill into the months here, it's going very slowly.
Does the cloud version of this get faster? Like, don't they have a version that's just like on 365?
This thing is blazing fast. I think it's because I'm running the recording program over it. It's like really, really killing it. The idea here, though, is if we drill into months, right, it's going to show us the month-over-month change for each month, okay? One formula. How often in Excel are you just repeating the same formula over and over and over again? I mean, a lot. You need it in every row, and you might miss a row or you goof something up, okay? So DAX in a nutshell, okay? Extremely powerful, does all sorts of crazy stuff. Write it once, reuse it. The data model is the VLOOKUP killer, okay? Any questions about DAX?
Can you show us how to launch it using Excel?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm in Excel, they've really built this right in now. So I have 2016. They all look a little different, okay? But this Get Data button here is the same button, more or less, that you have in Power BI. So that's where we would start and go and get our data. All right? So I'll just do it really quickly, just to show you it's the same thing. And you have to look at my pictures for a little while longer. All right, so all the same menus in here. All right, so I'm just going to grab one table just really quick. So here's the customer table. I'm going to hit Edit, okay, and it's going to take us to the Power Query window. Okay, remember I said the colors are green in here versus yellow, but this is the exact same menu. Okay, no difference here. And so in Excel, right, we're used to having one window. There's no other window. I mean, maybe you've seen like a macro or something in another window, but generally there's no, it's just the grid. That's it. Okay? So here we actually have two new windows. We have the Power Query window. Okay? And you'll see here in a second, it's going to load it in. And up here at the top, we have a Power Pivot tab as well. And this is where the model lives. Okay, so remember our model where everything was related and we wrote DAX and things like that. That's going to be in here.
Do you have to add that, or is that automatically pop up when you launch?
It really depends on which version you have. Okay, so if you have 2010, it's an add-in that you have to go download. If you have 2013 or 2016, it should just be in there. Depending on which like sub-version you have, sometimes it's just there, sometimes you have to go turn it on. Okay, a quick Google search will remedy that. How do I turn on Power Pivot? Okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
Say somebody gave you data, and there's about, I don't know, 250 files, all with the same headers.
Yeah. I'll show you that. Let me just show you that really quick, because that's a real like eye popper. So here, just so you see this, and you're comfortable with it. This is Power Pivot. Okay, so I just loaded one table in here, right? This is the same menu where we'd have all the tables and they're related. Okay, so remember when I said Power Pivot and all this in Power BI? They're not similar, they're like the same. Okay? They're essentially, so all the menus are the same. If you know how to do one, you know how to do all of them. All right? Is that, yeah, good? So reasons for using one tool over the other, there are some, but we can get into that later. So really quickly, Power Query, amazing. So I prepared for this question because it comes up a lot. So here's a set of files. Okay, there's one for every month. So this person produces this thing every month. And they're all separate files. Now they could all be one file and each month's in a different tab. See that a lot too, right? And you say, do y'all ever do like monthly trending data? It's like, well, it's just too much trouble, so we don't, because every data set is different. It's not together. And so in the past, whenever you got that thing, you'd have to copy and paste it all together. Okay. Or you'd try to convince them to do it that way, which I'd say almost never works. So here in Power Query, if we want to go to same data thing, right? We're going to go to get data, but here we're going to get it from a folder. Okay, so this folder has all this stuff in it. Now I didn't go and look at the files, but they're all exactly the same. Okay, and it just wants to know where we want to go look, and I will tell it. Okay, this is the folder we just looked at, and I'm just going to click OK. So it's going to go and peek in this folder, and it's going to pull out every file that it sees in there. Okay, so here they all are. So see, this is just the name of the different files. Okay. Now there's a way to do this where you actually get the file in every tab in it. So let's say someone had one for every year, and then every year they had a different tab for every month. Right? We could go in there and extract each one and put all those together. People are creative in the way they make messes. It's not really a mess if you think about it, though, right? They're doing it in a way that's like the most human way to do it, actually. Just a tab for every month. Right? It's actually much easier for a person to deal with, but a computer can't deal with it. Right? And that's the problem. So what we've been trying to do historically is ask them to do it the way the computer wants it. And they fight us. And they should, right? 'Cause it's stupid. They shouldn't do it the way we want. Like, their way is much easier, actually, for what they're trying to do. So this allows everyone actually to, like, stay friends. Okay? Keep it the way you do it. It's fine. I'll fix it. All right? So when I hit combine here, what's going to happen is it's going to take all of these and it's just going to stack them all up. Okay?
Do you have like a source column or?
That's a good question. It depends on which version of Power Query you have. This functionality to combine them is a little different in different versions, but it all essentially does the same thing. The newer versions have a column which says which file it came from, right? Which sometimes there's information in the file name that you need, right? Like in that scenario where each one's a year and then each tab is a month, you need the year from the file name to put in the data, right? So here they all are, right? Just stacked them all up. Done.
And the data that I have, it's all sorted by retailer and location. So every single file is a retailer.
Right, so you would see the retailer name here and you could include it in the data set. Right, you would just parse it out.
But all the headers the same as them too.
Yeah.
So if the headers are different, it'll just create another column for that data.
There are ways around that. So depending on how you do it, it's either going to match them by position or by name. So if the names are different, right, you can try to trick it by matching by position. If the positions are different, you can match by name or some combination of that. But the computer can only guess so much, right?
So it's better to go back and clean it up.
I think so, right? It's like go back and get the names right in there. Yeah.
Does this include the tabs?
The way I did it didn't include the tabs, right?
What do you do different for that?
So here's where you have to write a little formula, okay? If you email me, I will tell you. Right, so it's not worth going into now, right? But let me show you. I've got an example of this, right? Because I did a lot. I trained all the PwC people on.
30 minutes later.
Yeah, yeah,
So I was literally doing that exact thing less than 2 hours ago.
yeah.
I think I had about 75 tabs on one sheet.
I know. So I trained all the PwC due diligence people on how to use this tool, and they had some stuff like this. Yeah. So each region for every year has a file, okay? And for each region, oh, it wants me to close this. I think this is what you're talking about. Yeah. Right, so Asia for 2013 has January, February, March right in there. And so you got to go into each file, get every tab, stack it up, and then go to the next file and do the same thing and then stack them all up at the end. Very doable, right? You set it up once, you hit refresh every month, you're done. Improvement. Yeah, so I'm going to filter out those rows, right, like in this one, right? I'm only going to keep rows that have something in here, right? I'm just going to get rid of these. So cleaning up messy Excel files, like we got that. Now, to your point, sometimes things are so messy that it's like, all right, we got to clean it up a little bit before the computer can deal with it.
Can you create so we get a lot of claims data,
Mm.
and then maybe a client has two different carriers for their workers' comp coverage or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and each carrier tags the data differently, based on the location code and maybe the type of injury.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to consolidate into one type of if it's broke a finger versus cut a finger, we don't really care, it's a finger, right?
Yeah.
So we just tag both codes.
Insurance people are callous.
But I have what I do is I have this set of VLOOKUP tables.
Yeah, exactly.
I know to go in and I just run a VLOOKUP for
Yeah.
either code and it tags all of them as fingers.
So So the rest of the data is in the database, but in Excel, you've created this thing that's like,
Yeah, I just have a separate workbook.
so I love this. So what we do is we bring the data into our model from the database, okay, and it's coming from the database. And then we also load this Excel file up there too. So we have these two, right, they're just rectangles of data. It doesn't matter, it doesn't know where they came from.
Yeah.
And then in the model, before we load that claims data, we do the merge, right, and we don't load that other Excel table into the model, right? We just grab a column out of it. And then when it comes into the model, it's all there, right? Because that's all we need it for, right, is to like enrich our data a little bit.
Just tag the lines basically.
It'll go through and do the VLOOKUP for you basically, and then by the time it shows up, it's done. And you change the Excel file, you update it, you hit refresh, it all flows through.
So is
Right.
that in Power Query, or is that just in Power BI?
So
I mean,
it's all the same.
Right.
Yeah. So you can think about it, when Power Query is getting rectangles of data, it does not care where they came from. It's agnostic. It gets a rectangle, it's going to just treat it as if, it's any other rectangle. But I love that scenario, right? Database stuff, but gosh, we're not going to convince the database people to go clean up all this data. No, we've got some Excel file where we've tagged it all, right? And we just bring that in and put them together.
Then I have also this other problem we have where we have access to the database that our enterprise management system sits on.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I know much to do with it, except I've had them write me a few SQL queries so I can run financial reports.
Yep.
That their system can't do within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is like we've had problems distinguishing like new written transactional business over like renewed transactional business.
Right.
And so when I run those reports, I always have to go through this process where first I create a new column and then I sort by the transaction code.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's new I know is new.
Right.
Yeah. And then whatever it has, like if it's some crazy stuff like audit or whatever I don't recognize, I don't know what it is, right?
Yep.
So then I sort by the policy status. Is it new or renew?
Yep.
And sometimes it's not always new or renew. It's like cancel or rewrite or whatever. Don't know that. Then we have a third column that I sort by.
Yeah.
It's like it will tell me how the policy was entered. Was it entered as a new policy or was it?
Right.
Because that's always either a new policy or it was they did a process where they renewed it.
So you can imagine them writing something in the database that deals with this.
Okay.
Well, I mean, right, where it goes and looks at this, because there's a process, right? We look at this, then we look at this, then we look at this. You haven't asked them to do that.
I had asked them to do it the best they could, and that's what they did for me.
Right.
So I still am sorting things through Excel, but I was just wondering, is there a way to like write a formula? I mean, I've thought about doing like an if-then, like.
Totally. It's just a series of if statements, right? If this is true and this and this and this and this, then it's new.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's this.
Could solve it.
And so what we didn't look at in DAX, we use DAX to try to measure, but we can also use DAX to create new columns, which is more than, we use something in Power Query to like merge the columns together. What we're talking about here is more complicated, right? So in DAX it would be something that looked like an Excel formula. It would be an if statement, right? And it would have all this logic embedded in there, and it would produce this column that says, this is new, this is a renewal, right? And if we needed to change it, we'd just go tweak it a little bit, and everything would keep working. Yeah. But that's something that an analyst should handle, not an IT person, right? Because all the business rules are here. You're going to try to communicate to them that stuff. They don't really care. They're going to do it. They're going to get it right because they go back and forth, right? When you can just get it right. Yeah. Okay. Power Query, data modeling, DAX. We didn't actually look at visualization. Okay. At this point, everyone knows what a bar graph is. Okay. There are lots of cool visualizations in there, but at this point, right, the harder part is getting the model and the calculations right so that we can produce something that has the numbers we want. And how it looks at that point is important, but I'm going to tell you I think that's the easy part.
And also, I'll be going more into visualizations next month on Tableau
Yes.
and sharing.
Which is great, because Tableau has a really rich and fantastic visualization piece. I'd say Power BI is good. Like maybe it gets a B, I'd say on that part. Tableau is like an A+. So, yeah.
So saving point and sharing.
Yeah.
If I'm writing the queries and I am providing the information for people, can I save at that point for people who do want to do the analysis or have a particular analysis in mind, save at that point and share what I've uploaded in the BI?
You were writing SQL queries for people? Okay. So, you have a couple options. You can give people Power Query. Do you create views for people? Is that what you're doing? Yeah. So, that's just going to be in the database and they can get it here. What I would do if I were you is whenever someone wanted one of these, I would say, can you make it in Power Query for me? And have someone who knows how to do that. So then when they come to you with the requirements, it's already done. Because what I didn't show, I didn't think this was relevant, but it is for you. When I come here and we did some things to that customers table, remember that? So when I'm going to a database, when you're going to a database, all the things you do in Power Query, it's going to produce a SQL statement for you. So what I would, if you're comfortable with it, right? Have them go into Power Query, make it, teach them what a join is, all that stuff, let them make it, and then they'll just give you the SQL query. I wouldn't underestimate, I don't know your group, but your analyst actually, I think, over time can figure this out. I'm not saying all of them, but certainly there's one person.
But if we could have them set up and we had it ready to go, they could go in, press refresh when they're needing that. They don't have to email me if they don't talk to me. I don't need to
There is at least one IT person in the room tonight. Thank you for identifying yourself. Okay. So there's a lot of things I didn't talk about, okay? I didn't talk about sharing at all. The way you share this, let's say this was our report. Oops. As terrible as this report is, the way we share it is we click on this publish button, and it just gets pushed up to the Power BI service online, and people have access to it, and they go and look at it, and it's done. You put it on a refresh schedule and all that.
confidential information, PHI.
Yeah.
I don't publish it. Refrain.
You can publish it. The Azure cloud that it's in is certified to that level. You all would have to get comfortable with that, but there's government stuff in the Azure cloud now. So they've gone through that whole process.
Since you mentioned that,
Yep.
AWS, Amazon Web Services, is now HIPAA compliant.
Mm-hmm.
Is Azure by chance HIPAA compliant?
Yes. Yeah. I think Azure's actually gone further at this point than AWS have. So.
Say the snapshot of these. Let's say somebody sets you up a view and you run this, and
Yeah.
you get all this stuff nice and good looking, and somebody deletes your view. So is there a way you can make the data live with Power BI, or do you always have to have
Someone deletes your view. Well,
Sorry about that.
Oh, this is a personal problem here. No. If you've built a query, if you've done something in Power Query that replicates the view and you don't even use the view, then
Well, let's just say you wanted to do a snapshot about 1 year, and let's say you don't know how your database is going to look the next year. You want to keep something historical that would get you to work, because you run into old stuff that never comes back.
I understand what you're saying now. So let's say I've already loaded the data in. Let's say I just wanted this customer table in here to just be frozen. Okay, the data's already loaded in. I can right-click in it and say, don't refresh. Okay. It's just going to be in here, but when I hit refresh, it's going to refresh everything, and that one's going to just stay there.
So would you rather make a copy of it and name it 2013?
Y'all are in sketchy territory here, I'm going to say. So it is 7:34, so I'm just going to go ahead and stop to be respectful of people's time. But I'll stick around for a while if anybody wants to talk. Thank you for...
You need to wait until after 8.
Well, I have a soccer game that starts at 8. So we can all go there together. And I can consult from the sideline.
So can you share with the dashboards, with people that are not, that don't have access to Office 365?
I think they bill you for that. You have to have an E5 license or something, or it comes with E5, but you have
No. Yeah, so no, right? Because this is Microsoft, you can download Power BI Desktop for free. You can build this stuff for free. They make their money when you share it with somebody. They're really selling, even though it seems like they're selling this great tool, they're really selling servers in the cloud. And so when you want to share it with someone, that's when they want to charge you. Okay. All right. I'm going to press stop on the button.